So we'll do introductions here in the room. First the committee members, and then the committee members on the phone, and then we'll introduce other people in the room here. Hopefully you all got a copy of the agenda. So I'm Jim Pyro, the chair of the STEM Council.
Mark Lewis, the Director of STEM for the Chief Education Officer.
Dwayne Johnson, Globe 3 Ventures.
Eric Meslow, CEO of TimberCon.
On the phone?
Thompson Morrison, CEO of Fuse Insight.
Lisa Graham, Chief Scientist at Paradigm.
Thank you all. Being in the room.
Laura Roach, Department of Education.
Brett Wilder of the Oregon Alliance of Independent Colleges and Universities.
Joe Oshiro, Oregon Department of Education.
Tom Jones, retired CT teacher, STEM teacher.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about maybe just an update from Mark on what's been going on in terms of status.
Well, it's been a very quiet month for us. Since last we met, not much has really happened. No, I do want to say that there have been some changes, as you know. We have a new governor. We've got some proposals in front of us in terms of several different legislative concepts that impact the STEM Investment Council and its work. It remains an extremely exciting time for STEM and CTE here in the state of Oregon, and this governor is very keen on supporting both education as well as continuing to attend to economic prosperity issues related to our communities across the state. So our work is more important now than ever.
Mark, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Yes.
So is the government transition impacting you and your organization directly in any way that would impact us?
Not at this time that I know of. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's, and maybe just another comment. At the last committee meeting, we had a conversation with Senator Dembrow. He had an interest in creating a CTE investment council similar to the STEM Council. We're working with Senator Dembrow to hopefully bring the two concepts together to create a combined CTE STEM investment council because of the nexus of the two organizations and the thought process and how they're well connected all the way through the learning continuum for children. We think that makes a lot of sense, and then that would be the handoff to the OTC in terms of, and we'll talk about the OTC later. So we really are trying to think about holistically the whole pipeline, and so today we're going to talk a little bit about CTE and really get kind of up smart about CTE. We'll have to see where Senator Dembrow's proposal goes. I'm hopeful that that will have success and it will get some grounding, which will potentially reconstitute the STEM Investment Council, which will make it broader, a broader representation from the community as well as a broader mission.
Is Mark acting as our liaison with Senator Dembrow on those efforts, amendments? Or?
Myself and the Chief of Staff for the OEIB met with Senator Dembrow yesterday morning.
Excellent.
We had an excellent conversation. We mapped out some of the issues that we needed to address. I got tasked with comparing the various legislation and to be more formally highlighting some of those things that we need to sort through. And so part of our conversation today should also include, perhaps thinking along those lines.
Okay.
Concerns that the council members have, et cetera, and certainly in our conversation with Laura Roach here from the Department of Education, who is going to be diving in much more deeply into issues related to career and technical education than we have in the past, and sharing her thoughts on some of the challenges ahead, knowing that there's a lot of complementary issues that we can address together, but also helping this council better understand the infrastructures in the field and maybe some perceived tensions, but focusing mostly on the opportunity that exists for us.
Okay. Maybe just one other point on that. I think there was some concern, and I would try to alleviate that concern, that somehow if it became a combined council that CTE wouldn't get its fair representation, and that's not the case. I mean, it's pretty clear there's such a closest nexus to what we're trying to accomplish and what CTE is trying to accomplish that there's not that, and we could probably address that through subcommittee work and things like that as we go forward.
Yeah, I absolutely encourage members of the STEM side and CTE side to figure out how to have a beer or two together. and honestly, break some of those tensions that are there, mostly because we just haven't communicated well together, not because of a difference in opinion.
Yeah. And for those people who were able to join us at the Capitol for CTE Day, a phenomenal day, lots of support, broad level support, and I'm hoping that Laura again will address some of the energy that has been circling around the various bills with career and technical education and continuing the revitalization efforts. I think it's really critical to note for this council is that though there may be some structural changes being proposed in this in the proposed merger, what we do not want to happen at all is to impact the investments either on the career and technical revitalization efforts that are currently underway, nor what is going on with support for our regional STEM hubs and other investments. So we have to be very mindful of that in our planning to make sure that we do not negatively impact those things underway already.
As well as there's a connection there. I'd like to make sure the funding stays almost in two buckets so that there's assurance that it gets spent in the areas. I mean, that'll create some comfort so there's not this view that it's all going to get sucked in one direction or the other. But really,
certainly at this biennium,
yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, cool. Any questions from members on the phone? Okay, hearing none. I think our first presentation is going to be on CTE in Oregon. And then after that, we can talk a little bit more about kind of the connection between CTE and STEM. So Laura, thank you for coming. Appreciate your interest. Oh, you want me to?
No, we can come back to this.
Come back to the layout.
Yeah.
Can I sit back here or do I need to move?
You can sit
Can I
wherever
sit
you
back
want.
there? Yeah, okay.
Close to a mic, right? That's the key.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you.
Next to you.
So, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and to talk a little bit about career and technical education and our relationship to STEM a little bit and things that are important to the career and technical education field. I'm excited about our opportunity to work together, and I think the CTE field is excited too. They may need to understand it a little better. We have not, Mark has visited with them and shared your vision with them, and I think they support that wholeheartedly. What we work with a lot of time is once we get past the vision is the operationalizing of the work, and that's where some of the really challenging work comes in. What I gave you, I've shared with before, are the principles of CTE that have been adopted nationally, and we actually did a crosswalk with your manifesto and found them to be very highly coordinated, but a very different language. And so sometimes when you have a few minutes, you might want to read through that. I think it has a great deal of value. We are part of a national organization for career and technical educations, and all 50 states and provinces are there. And together, we work to advocate for CTE nationally. And I serve on behalf of the Department of Community Colleges and ODE in that role. I wanted to just put this up for Mark because I thought it was important. The other day, Senator Dimbrow recognized me as the Countess of CTE. And I just wanted to remind all of you that the Countess of CTE started on a rural farm in Virginia and has spent probably 13 years in a barn raising sheep to get her first money for her daughter's first Apple computer. I've also served as executive director and builder of the Highland Medical Center in Virginia, worked in a hospital. I have a degree in home economics and a master's in education, and I'm married to a machinist millwright project manager for the world's largest pump storage facility. So my life, and I have 4 children who are in the military. So my life has been CTE. It's been the fabric of our life. So when I talk about it, and think about it, I think about it from multiple personal experiences and a very broad base of students and parents across the board who are trying to help students learn how to acquire the skills and to be the very best they can be. So when you talk about me, when I talk about CTE, I think of all of the career areas that we have to serve. One of the things that I think we share in common across internationally is Gallup says there are 2 things that every family wants, and that's a good job and a happy family. And what we have to give is hope. And I think that STEM and CTE and your manifesto share the same things that we in CTE want to give. We want students to have a good job, a happy family, and we want to give them hope. So with that base, I think we can move forward if we keep focused on the students and the opportunities they might have. And just for the record, that happens to be my darling grandson and daughter. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to put that picture up there.
Did she sign a photo release?
She is a photographer, so actually I think I might have taken that picture anyway. There is a troubled history of vocational education, and if you want to hear a great little clip about vocational
Or
education.
just for a second, pause for a second. Can everyone on the phone see the presentation?
I can, thank you.
Good.
Okay, great, it's working.
So if you really want to hear a great little short clip on the history of vocational education, starting from when we first were training factory workers, up through the wars, into all the way up through the various changes in education, through No Child Left Behind and all those things. It's a great clip. And it has been kind of a troubled history of education, vocational education, because it is constantly being asked to reinvent itself and take on new roles and different roles. But I think it's a very challenging and exciting opportunity. My first degree, of course, was in home economics years ago. And of course that is now kind of passé, but that degree in home economics got me to the multitude of jobs that I currently have through the transfer of skills as everybody else who has gone that path. In fact, Colleen Waddle, my former director, had a degree in home economics from years gone by. And so we don't want to not think about all those career areas and what they do to bring students to where we might want them to be. But just since I've been in Oregon, and you might hear a little accent, I am from Virginia, which has a very strong career and technical education system. But just since I've been in Oregon, I came in 1997, we have called our work vocational education. We called it professional technical education, and now we are career and technical education. So again, constantly trying to reinvent ourselves. We have lived, since I've been here, when I first came, through the school to work agenda, through the SIM and the CAN, and only to have that work completely dropped and attempt to integrate it into the Oregon diploma. And when it was integrated into the Oregon diploma, career and technical education became an option that you could have 3 or more credits to graduate. And so it took away, in an attempt to integrate and to make it stronger and put it there for all students, we actually lost a significant amount of momentum. And part of that decision making too, what had to do with the fact that colleges had stopped training teachers for CTE, and the CTE teacher workforce wasn't really there. So you couldn't mandate CTE across the state if we didn't have the teacher workforce to support it. So there were a lot of good reasons, but that then followed by the recession, what created a lot of challenges in order to maintain CTE across all the career areas. And I know you have seen this list before. So this set of career areas is a part of a national organization of information, and it's supported in Oregon to some degree by about 120 individual pathways that we work with. Career and technical education is an educational strategy, but it also has with it a body of knowledge. If you are going into healthcare, if you're going into business and industry, if you're going into agriculture, yes, it is an educational strategy for applied learning, but it has a body of knowledge. And that body of knowledge is exemplified across the nation through what we call the career cluster skill sets, or the Oregon skill sets, which are industry standards for education of high school and post-secondary students. And we maintain those on our website, and they were done by committee, including multiple workforce partners, to organize and think about what should high school students be able to know and do, not only in terms of the body of knowledge of content in healthcare or whatever, but also academically and in workforce preparation skills. So that set of, quote, they're not really standards, they're knowledge and skill sets, are the foundation of our programming for the approved programs in Oregon.
Do you know how well those align with the career and college readiness standards that have been?
Pretty well. I mean, there are multiple layers to them, and I think very well. I haven't recently done a crosswalk. We've done so many crosswalks, but I don't think you'll find any challenges or missing pieces in the skill sets. There are multiple layers, and the national set is multiple layers, and it's all there. It just might not be organized exactly the same way you guys have organized those. In Oregon, we call our programs of study, and this does indeed come from our federal Perkins language, because at one time, up until CTE revitalization, we only had federal funds to enhance or improve programs, and at the high school level, it ran $6 to $7 million and still does. The other 6 to 7 goes to community colleges. We also have programs that are in development or who would like to be a program of study that are kind of in the middle. And then we have CTE courses. So when we keep records and data, up until this point, we have only been able to keep records on those approved programs of study. We are trying to capture now CTE courses. But because of the limited data capacity of the department, and because really career and technical education, you know, the data was not necessarily a priority, we did not ask schools to submit that data. It's a heavy lift to submit every course out there.
Can you speak a little bit about 600 programs of study? Does that mean that there's 600 approved programs that are being run out in high schools, even if, so they're not necessarily different programs of study?
Yes, they could be.
I mean, is there commonality then and coherence across that 600 where there are, if you aggregated them and clustered them, would it make sense that there are 18 of them?
Like
Right.
welding might be a broad category. It might have programs in 20 schools that's exactly the same. Yeah.
They're not
Or
exactly
similar.
the same. They're similar, and they all operate off the same standards or skill sets.
Okay.
The problem is when you go to Portland, you may be able to offer 6 courses in welding, and you go to Eastern Oregon, you might be able to offer 2. So you can't have the same level of structure across the state, and it also depends on teacher capacity. So that's one piece. The other piece is we have been trying to have statewide programs of study, like all of our agriculture programs have come together and agreed on this set of standards, or most of them. This set of standards, this is how we're going to operate. Much more challenging to do, and it takes about 2 years to build a program of study, to be honest. And it takes almost a year and a half to get all of those programs to the same standards. So does that answer your
So
question?
is the 50 a subset of the 600? Is that what do we think?
Pretty
Those
much.
are the ones that are approved, kind of gone through some kind of rigor.
The issue with the programs of study when we started is that the federal law required us to look at alignment and articulation. And so when you see a 600 program of study at a high school level, there's a post-secondary community college program tied to that somehow for some level of overlap. But if you go into Southern Oregon, for example, and they wanted to have a radio broadcasting program, their community college might not have a radio broadcasting program. So they have to coordinate with Mount Hood Community College, or they may have to kind of stay in that other category because they can't meet the requirements that we've set out. What we learned when we started this work, which was in 2006, around this structure, is the goal was always articulation, but what we really learned is that alignment was far more important than the articulation. And I know that sounds a little strange, but just getting the alignment done and getting the teachers to work between high schools and community colleges was much more important than trying to figure out how many credits were articulated at the time. Having said that, there's a lot of dual credit in CTE, and it is being implemented. But sometimes it just simply isn't possible, particularly when you bring teachers from industry. A good example is at Chemeketa Community College at the time, if you had a high school teacher who didn't have a master's in horticulture but had a master's in agriculture, they weren't allowed to do dual credit because they didn't have a master's in horticulture. So there have been some constraints along the way, and we couldn't take that on and implement this program across the state.
So
With
how would a student and their parents navigate this? In other words,
They don't know anything about this. This is a structural thing from the Department of Education. So,
But there's a tremendous, would you say that it's fair to say that there's a tremendous amount of inequities regionally?
absolutely.
And that then, the programs that are perpetuated often may depend on just the skill set of the individual who is at the local level, and when they retire, that program
Yes.
doesn't necessarily continue.
Yeah. And,
And it's not necessarily aligned to regional needs.
Right. You might have in Eastern Oregon, agriculture is going to be one of the primary programs in Eastern Oregon. But not every school would have an agriculture program. So it depends. Do I have a teacher? There's just a multitude of things that are associated with this, particularly as the disinvestment has come through.
Is there anything in those programs that preclude a child from, once you get into that track, you can't go into college or something like that?
Absolutely not.
They're
Absolutely.
making sure that you're not getting tracked such a way that you're precluded from college.
Right, and I think that's an interesting thing. One of their challenges of CTE is it's for those kids. And what we know is those kids can be anywhere from the highest student in the classroom, the valedictorian, to the student who's struggling the most. So it's been interesting, and our graduation is which means those kids can graduate. So we have absolutely no interest in tracking students. We fight that tooth and nail. However, there has been a lot of concern as we talk about regional programs and regional skill centers, whether or not we set ourselves up to track students. And that's a very delicate balance as we move forward. It's very challenging to have a situation like that, have regional programs, and not fall heir to seeing students tracked.
and what's the primary issue around that?
Tracking? Just that you are defining a career for students. You are encouraging there's one thing to encourage students. There's another thing to tell them that's what they ought to do, and then not let them come back and do other things or keep them. That's why Oregon has kept CTE in the comprehensive high schools. It has been a very strong foundation of belief since I've been here that CTE needed to be in comprehensive high schools so that students they would have better opportunities and not get isolated.
Well, that was actually the root of my other question, because if the students are actually, and their parents are trying to figure out what the options are,
Right.
then they would want to know what's available. They want to know if this is something that's home brewed, and it's just a one-off, or if there's actually a career or some sort of opportunity beyond that.
Right.
And to do that, they'd have to be able to see at least the structure of these programs and these offerings, and then be able to say, oh, this is something I would want, right?
Here's what this is one of the simple ones. You should see the community college ones. When we talk, and I think that's a little bit about the difference with CTE in that whenever we at the department are working with CTE, we are working with program design so that students can have a pathway and see that they could go into introduction to CTE, that here are the pathways that you could go, and that instructors are helping them see what that pathway might be. And then on the other side, you see the basic requirements that they might need. So when I say parents don't ever see this, they don't ever deal with the things that a lot of students don't even know most students don't even know they're CTE students. And one of the things about it, this particular program design, is that we have been trying to help our teachers understand they don't do this just to get approved at the Department of Education. They should be doing this so that teachers, students, parents, whomever can see what the opportunities are. They feel like that ODE is just making them jump a hoop and lining this stuff up, and they don't really need to do that. And that is one of our requirements is you need to build a program design. We're going to look at it in relationship to industry standards and academic standards. And you are going to be measured on academic performance, technical skill performance, graduation, and post-secondary placement. And we're going to track and we're required to track the non-trad or ethnic populations within our student population. So it has been challenging. This is called a career pathway. It has many variations for different people. But what it reflects is our focus, given our limited resources, was on how do you build a program design, not just create a course. And some people agree with that, some don't. But it's the choice. We had a task force when Perkins 6 was reauthorized and a lot of this new information came out. We had multiple task forces across the state. And one of the decisions that's been made, and some people struggle with this, I do, because it's 600 of them for us to either approve or evaluate. But we made the decision as a collective task force from across the state that a program of study format would be good and should be the goal of every program in Oregon. You ought to try approving 600 of these puppies. So what we started doing is approving 200 a year. And now we'll have to look at whether the process we have is the process we want to keep, or will we move more to a more evaluative process.
Well, has there been any sort of gap analysis that's been done in terms of the programs of study or the pathways in alignment to the high wage, high demand sort of careers? In particular, my concern has been and continues to be our computer science in our middle schools and high schools, and how those align or don't align, and the relative dearth of computer science in our public schools.
When they
K-12.
when they submit their application to us, they are to identify the labor market need in their community. Now, that's a pretty heavy lift at a high school level.
Yeah.
Because again, what teacher lives in rural America and what opportunities live in rural America create a little more of a challenge. So they are to identify a need in their region. At the community college level, it is very, there's much stronger connections with the business and industry about determining the need of the program, and they go through a fairly significant evaluative process about whether that program should be established, and are they in fact overlapping with private career schools that might also be offering that service.
I recognize that the intent and the reality in the field is sometimes different.
Oh, yeah.
So given your great experience in this, where are we in reality? With what exists in the field in terms of the due diligence of doing that kind of an alignment. And
I would say the due diligence is not very high.
Yeah.
And again, just because you have teachers that have been hired in the unions and whatever, and so, and to be honest, I understand what you're saying, but if you're really looking at secondary CTE as preparing students for those transferable skills, getting them engaged, we have not been tasked before to produce students for occupations.
Sure.
We have been tasked to integrate CTE with academic instruction and to help support the graduation requirement. And that's been our first and foremost responsibility with CTE. So it's been a secondary, it's a legitimate concern, it's part of our requirements, but it has not at the due diligence level that you might have hoped.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I was just saying, when I look at a chart like this, and as you say, you could bring out several hundred more, it reinforces the conversation we're having about STEM and CTE. I mean, my gosh, I look up here, and yes, there's the practical side, but look down the left-hand column of what you're trying to have to back up all these skills. I think the opportunity I see continues to be how do you teach the stuff on the left over on the right so that it's not boring. Because when I see Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Pre-Calc, I'm falling asleep in this chair right now. But if I was applying it to all those things on the right, I would be a highly motivated and anxious student that would be engaged.
So, Eric, what is this?
I have no clue, I can't.
Tell me what it is. Be what you think it is.
It's fame. It's a cord.
So this is one piece of wood
Yeah.
that has never been cut.
Okay.
It's a bookend.
Oh, there you go.
Tell me about the math in that.
Yeah, there you go.
And tell me when we talk about wood shop, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Could you do this by yourself without any design
Yeah.
and create something like this? This is also a tabletop with glass over it.
Yeah.
So I think that how that looks and how we perceive CTE, and this is done in wood shop. But I bet, how many of us could do the math that sits in here? And this was done by somebody when he sat in the back of the classroom, and all three in the back of the classroom added up their algebra class scores. They didn't pass the exam. But this is it. So I think that we need to do, just as you say, look at the opportunities that we have, and we would like to do that.
Reinforce, I mean, strongly reinforce. If you can't do the instruction in it, at least tie it together.
Right.
Yeah, make it real.
Well, and to your point, I mean, I went to that math and that type of application when you started talking about what the outcomes are, because you're absolutely right. I did wood shop, I did metal shop, and I went into computer science. Okay, but the conversation I've had with the people that were in the shop were about, well, how do we make this thing?
Right,
And we'd sit there and figure it out,
right.
right? So, I think that this is where the overlap can be of CTE and the STEM. It's really gets into that design learning, putting your hands on things and coming up with a place for you to apply those things.
Right. So one of the interesting conversations too, I'll share that Mark and I had, we had been around a few times, is that CTE if you were to talk to my staff, every one of those people in the Department of Education would have CTE start in kindergarten, just like you believe STEM should. And they believe they did start CTE in kindergarten. And so what's happened though is CTE, because of the funding stream, has been designated as a high school and community college program. So you don't want to be in that box, and neither do we. Because we actually have people who know that they have been teaching CTE, just like the fabric of my life has been CTE. I didn't have a program design, but I went through multiple programs and I didn't know what they were. In fact, I only took one home economics class in high school because the teacher told me I needed to cook my oatmeal overnight on a wood stove. So that was the end of that event. But nevertheless, she was also 80. So anyway.
So is that true that all CTU programs are just funded federally? They're not, there's no
Well,
state
this is a tricky conversation. Yes and no. Okay, it is not trackable. So you have the school support fund that goes out, right? None of it is dedicated for CTE. How a superintendent or a principal chooses to use that money is their decision, and it's not traceable. What we have had, and most of these, what we hear from teachers is, we don't get it. I had someone argue with me over $5,000, and I said, why are you arguing with me? And he said, because that's the only professional development money my teachers get. And so, and even with the Perkins money, when you take $6 to $7 million and spread it over 300 high schools, and it's census-based, you have one school that gets $500 out of a consortium, and you might have a school that gets $5,000, and you got PCC that gets $1 million. But it's census-based. So the amount of money that goes to an area is based on census, and we have absolutely no control over that. So the answer is yes, Jim, it's the only money to expand and enhance. Not to say that maybe Mark's school doesn't put some money into something for CTE, that we don't know
because the
that.
superintendent or the school board or whatever.
Because
Community value.
Yeah, sees a value.
Yeah.
Our biggest challenge is many of our administrators have never been exposed to CTE.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's been my experience in looking at individual high schools. It's about the community right now. If you have a community that sets an expectation with the school board and the administrator, then it's there in spades. But if there is a lack of community involvement, it's just...
So there, I think you probably have seen this slide before. The green is what the state has given us over the last 2 biennium to improve the investment in CTE.
Please tell me you brought the state of Washington.
I did not bring it, but I.
Oh.
How much are they getting?
Okay,
I
so.
fair to ask.
I didn't, I'm sorry, I'm so.
I know, you gotta bring that out.
I
Everywhere you
you know,
go.
I don't
We
know
should
how
make
many.
t-shirts with that on it.
Okay,
Still 18
the
times
state
heavy
of,
work there.
okay, the state of Washington invests $384 million
Wow.
in secondary
And
CTE.
we invest 25 million, which happens.
That's our proposal.
That's our proposal, and half of that's federal.
We only have 11.
Yeah, we only have 11. So Mark's number is 18-1. I'm going to let him talk about that number. But the larger thing is that they have a system. They have a system of comprehensive high schools. They have skill centers. They have satellites. And then they have their community college program. So when you see my blood pressure rise, when you look at me and say, why aren't you doing what Washington's doing? And I'm sitting there going, the other thing is, you know, Oregon is a local control state. Now, that is not the case in Virginia, where I come from.
Washington is not.
And so they're behind these frameworks are the standards, but we don't have consistent course numbering, and we don't say, this is what you have to teach in that course. So when you really give independence to teachers, you really are giving independence to teachers, because we don't have that background structure, and we don't do curriculum.
But don't teachers follow the money just like most people? I mean, if there was additional opportunities, funding, and support for them, if they chose a particular path, don't most people by nature follow that kind of guidance?
They will.
Yeah.
Well, you know, yeah, yeah, we'll talk about that more.
Okay.
Which is a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah.
If we're, a couple of things that are coming to mind. One is the wonderful work with the Oregon Talent Council that we're also going to be talking about to identify those high demand, high wage, and more important, to Representative Johnson's point at the testimony earlier this morning, was what are those cross-cutting skills? So instead of thinking in K-12 about particular job pathways, what are those cross-cutting skills that are necessary to fill multiple, whether it's data and analytical ability, or it's fabrication, or three-dimensional reasoning, et cetera, that applies to many, many different career sectors.
Yeah,
and that's where a K-12 system can respond.
I was much, in that previous slide, I really liked it before it actually reconcentrated at the bottom, right? It was about exploring and learning a variety of different skills and options.
And that's the interesting part. So, you know, when I talk about an improved program, you're talking about really creating a design. But there are lots of classes out there that are exploratory, but it's just that the department has never tried to manage that. I don't think we could. But it doesn't mean that
But we
kids aren't
could
getting.
incent some cohesion.
Sure,
We certainly
absolutely.
could.
We could do
So
that.
if Washington's been doing this for a while, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah, for years.
So do they have empirical data on the impacts and results
Yeah.
of that
The,
that show the value to students and their outcomes?
The return on investment for secondary is 8-1. And the return on investment for post-secondary, I don't know why I didn't think, but I guess because I scared myself to death putting it in the
Did the
slide.
crowd respond to that, though? I mean, it's a really powerful message.
I know, I just happened to cut, I'm sorry. And 2-1 at post-secondary.
So it's a no-brainer in regards to what it means for the state's economy. I mean,
And not to mention the back end cost of
Well,
not
teaching
yeah.
kids, yeah.
right. So I have to be, it was really brave of me to put that up there. I'm just saying,
got
I
your
didn't.
back. We got your back. I mean,
I just didn't want to insult the legislature or make them.
Yeah, I think that the
I would say there is a certain group of legislators that respond very positively to that. And there's some that certainly become defensive, and we're not Washington, we're not California, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I think you framed it right in your testimony when you said, you know, but they have a whole system here, and we don't have that. So I wouldn't know what to do with $375 million. But I can tell you what I might do with 100, or I might be able to do 80, or certainly something larger than 25.
And if you ask me, I'd give you an answer.
There you go.
So I'm sorry.
No, that's good. One other thing that Washington has done, in addition to the funding, to address the funding issue, is that they have seen, incarceration rates go down.
Yeah.
So what their argument, part of their argument is in terms of economic prosperity, but employability, and employability leads to lower crime rates, less people in prison. Right? It's a virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
And so they actually switched funding from their prison system into supporting the CTE, and that's where some of that funding came from.
And I think that's probably where that 8-1 ratio is a return on the investment as well. And Washington has a fabulous data system that allows them to do that. Not many states do, but Washington does. So, and they're very closely tied to their workforce partners. And so I am a bit envious. I also, when I look back to Virginia, I'm a bit envious to see.
Central control.
Which I know. Well, it's the teacher training, it's a certification that students get. It's those kind, it's that kind of consistency where CTE wasn't allowed to fall off the plate. And of course, I realize that industry is a little different there, structure is a little different, but I long for our students to have some of the opportunities that I think we might be missing because we have shifted our focus so much.
So if we are successful in this biennium too, maybe this is the question, what you're gonna do, here's what you're gonna do with it. That's what you're gonna do with it.
Well, this is what we did last time.
Yeah.
We got 11 million. We were only able to do 32 projects. There were 60 high schools across the state, 338 business partners and industry and labor partners identified on that dribble of money. There were about 2,600 students directly impacted through this 18-month process. And you can see there on the right how money was spent. It is very challenging for people to develop these grants and pull them off. They are heavy lifts, and I'll show you why. And we do have a plan for the money this year.
One thing that jumped out at me when I saw that slide last night was that the health sciences, the biggest need from the employment department by far is health sciences, and yet we have, again, this comes to the alignment issue, is how do we align our investment strategies in these CTE and STEM programs to actually meet the broader needs.
And it's actually interesting too, with health sciences, you're talking about some of the very most expensive programs as well.
Expensive, shortage of teachers.
Yeah.
And then I can tell you 4 or 5 years ago, I can't cite the data right now. First of all, understand some of these programs, community colleges don't have a need for our high school students. They are full. Mountain Hood, several years ago, when I was doing some different work, 3,000 applicants for 6 positions. Do they have to worry about a high school program? No. Automotive at Chemeketa, they got all the students they need.
And these Oregon students?
Yeah. I guess. Well, I don't have the head count, but yes. They don't have to worry about high school students. They don't have to worry about program of study alignment. They're full. So, your colleges have been full the last few years. As unemployment went down, the college enrollment went up. I have 4 classes. Why do I have to deal with this high school stuff? So, and then having the right instructor. And so some of those few programs that we have are, Lane's Healthcare is in that. They have a regional program and they're serving multiple high schools with the teacher. So that regional program is doing very well, and there's so much excitement and enthusiasm, and that's part of some of our proposal for the new money. And if you look at that, you can look at the graduation rate of our CTE concentrators, and that's really not a whole lot of CTE. It's 1 or more credits. You're not talking about a lot of CTE. 86% basically.
30 percentage points for African American and American Indian students.
Right. So we are very proud. Now we also know that those are only the students in approved programs. And some will argue that some of the students who need it most get pulled out of our programs because they are given more math or more English to graduate. So there is a dynamic there. But when you look at the national CTE graduation rate, it is 90% and above. So I feel very strongly that the data is reasonable and that it does reflect student engagement. And that's not talking about someone who's taken 3 or 4 credits necessarily. It's talking about a student who's taken 1 or more credits.
And that's probably at the high school level.
Mhm.
At the high school level.
So Mark and I were at a meeting of Saturday Academies Board yesterday where we were talking about the opportunities around disadvantaged groups, and the horror show the graduation rates clearly are in many cases. And we were talking more along the lines of STEM, but obviously again, this clearly shows we just got to make education real to people.
Right.
And they're more likely to stick with it. I mean, is that what we should learn from this?
Absolutely.
Interesting and then
Make it
Persistence.
relevant.
Persistence, yes, and there is a ratio of, I have to get it right, 2 academic classes to 1 CTE class. Statistically improves graduation rates. I think it's 2 or 3, I think it's 2. I have to look it up. I've had so many data things in my head. I'm the math traumatized, so I'm get a little nervous. But there's a statistical relationship. So you don't want to put them all and give them all CTE classes. You don't want to do that. You want to keep that balance in check so that you support that statistical gain.
From conversations I've had with teachers around the state on this, it also seems like this is that wonderful bridge to opportunity for groups that otherwise wouldn't move on to 4-year institutions, 2-year degrees. I mean, they not only get out of high school, which is wonderful, but they actually feel empowered enough to go on to advanced degrees.
What we can track, we know that 56% of our graduate students go on to college. We don't know about employment because we can't track Social Security numbers.
I'll show you how you can actually.
Okay, if we can get it done, it'd be fabulous. But we do know that at least 56%, and many of them go to the university. Many of them do not go to the community college. I think it's probably half and half. I'd have to go back and check that number too. The sad thing is, of the 180,000 high school students, we're only serving 9 to 12. We're only serving about 60,000 out of half credit, about 40,000 out of credit, and 10 or 11,000 at 3 credits. So here you have this 180,000 high school population, and because we don't have the funding and the resources, the group that we're able to provide services to in the approved format is smaller than we would like. Whereas the original vision was that every high school student in Oregon in the STEM and CAM days could have access to CTE.
Well, and you look at Save and Schellenberg,
Right.
and what their graduation rate is something like 94,
Yeah.
96, something
Yeah.
like that.
And they serve most all of their students in their population. Canby has a very strong program, so it varies. In some places, it was just literally dropped like that. And I was having a hard time believing it when I was seeing it, but we've lost about 600 programs since in the last 20 years.
Is there some data from Washington that suggests that people going through CTE, CTE programs at the high school, middle school level are more likely to become STEM degrees at the end? And is there more graduates, like in Oregon it's 2%. 2% of the high school students graduate from high school and end up with a STEM degree. Does Washington show a bigger number in that sense?
I don't know. I'd have to look. I don't know.
Because I think that's what I tend to hear is that kids don't get exposed to these things early on, so they get lost. They never see STEM or an engineering or some of those
Right.
degrees as a pathway, and so they never even go that direction.
So part of the proposal, you might also, this is a cohort rate as well. I don't know if I have this in here. We were working on these this morning. Part of the proposal that we have for CTE funding for this year was that we would, first of all, have a sum of money in the 11,000 mark to redo these grants. But then on a second tier, there would be money invested in some of these regional programs that could then run through the summer, and a sound of money, bridge program in the summer. So students, particularly underserved students, could maybe even go across state and be a part of a residential summer opportunity bridge program and begin earning an industry certification. So that was part of kind of looking at the system. How do we support the system in terms of continuing to incent a lot of different high schools? And these grants, are from 300 to 500,000, no more than 500,000. That we would continue to incent that, but then we would start incenting that larger regional investment with an extended summer program or a bridge program, both for middle school and high school students. So that's kind of a little bit of the design we were thinking about for the next.
So do you have a breakdown of where these students are and how equitably the access to these programs is spread around the city and the state? So, I look at these numbers, I have no idea how many students we're actually talking about in Hispanic and, in the African American.
We have that. I do have that. I can share it. I can tell you that our enrollment in CTE parallels the state's demographics. We are constantly checking that. We are currently doing And I can give you the numbers by, it's pretty heavy lift, but I can give you the numbers by district or consortia. We operate by consortia, so that's another way to challenge. We are currently also doing, taking some of our federal money and investing in 3 to 5 projects with NAEP in order to work with STEM equity in some of the rural districts. But we have that data, it's pretty cumbersome.
What's a
Consortium. When our federal funds come out, because we manage it through a consortia of schools that come together, and they're supported by a regional coordinator that is not an employee of ODE. And so the money comes from the department. It goes to that consortia unless they choose not to play, and some do. And then that consortia of regional schools sit down and decide how to spend the money. Because not enough money to do.
No, I understand.
Yeah, and then we also have community colleges in that consortia as well. So in many cases, so that's kind of that helps us. That way we don't have to distribute. We can distribute to the 17 consortia, and then they distribute. So it's an interesting thing because we've got these consortia going on, and you've got STEM hubs going on. Mm-hmm. We got regional coordinators distributing money, providing professional development, and you've got STEM hubs emerging, and they're scratching their heads going, huh?
Yeah, that's exciting. There's a connection.
So that was probably not our greatest moment in design, but maybe so. Maybe it is exactly what it is, and then we just need to define their roles and responsibilities appropriately.
Who's on those consortia?
It would be like in Portland area, like out in Multnomah with David Douglas.
I'm looking for like, who are those people? I mean, are they coming from the schools?
Yeah, they're coming from the schools, and the regional coordinator will either be seated at a community college or probably an ESD, Education Service District.
Would you think about using those consortiums to deal with the revitalization funds
We
too? We're
do.
gonna push it out to them
It was
too.
interesting. We didn't do it that way last time, but they came forward and said, "Why aren't we included?"
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important strategy that we're going to have to, because some schools went off on their own and built their own grants without including the regional coordinator, and they're like, "Why wasn't I included?" And now they're coming to me for teacher licensure after they built the programs, and they manage teacher licensure at the regional level.
Is there a requirement for them to share their best practices?
We do that. We have
Yeah.
meetings.
Requirement. Because see, ultimately one of my concerns, and I've been involved in STEM grants for curriculum development, and you see a tremendous amount of money dropped on an individual school or school district. They create something pretty special and they hold on to it like it's their IP, and they don't multiply it best practices around the state. So one of the problems we have is with limited resources, how do we, going
We
back to
do.
the Virginia model, how do you get it out there, right, and
Well,
consistently?
The regional coordinators meet, we used to meet monthly,
Yeah.
and they would come together and talk and distribute ideas. They're not meeting as frequently as cost and travel costs went up. So they do that, and then we have a spring conference in April. That's Oregon Association of Career and Technical Education, and teachers present mostly, and the staff presents, and they share what they're doing. So we do, and then we had a CTE Revitalization Summit in the fall where we brought our awardees together to talk about what they had done with their grants. So, and we have a website. So the answer is yes, not perfect.
Well, where does the funding for those coordinators come from?
That's interesting. They can have 5% of the award from Perkins, which could be as little as $30,000 as much as, $1 million. They can have 5% of the Perkins federal funds for administration, and after that, the school districts and the colleges have to support it.
Is there a natural competition, if you will, between the community colleges and the high schools for these funds? Or is there collaboration? Do they look at a continuum and how they work together?
They're not, that's an interesting question. We in Oregon, the federal funds, we in Oregon have independently decided through our whatever process that they'll be split 50-50, so we don't. However, when it gets out into the region, or if you are doing a consortium, there's some challenges there. There's some serious negotiation.
So the state money is 50-50 between post-secondary or community colleges and high schools,
Yeah.
but the federal money, there's competition for.
No, the federal money,
Split.
yes.
State
And-
money is not.
Now, community colleges were not eligible recipients for CTE revitalization,
Oh, okay.
but they could be partners, and they could receive resources, and that came in the law. So they're not an eligible recipient. They cannot be the fiscal agent for that money, but they can be and are partners. Question, comment? I'm afraid I'm going too long.
This is really,
This is
really
great
helpful
stuff.
background.
Thank you.
This helps us understand
If you can talk about middle school at some point.
Okay. So middle school, our federal money could go down as far as 8th grade, but we don't have federal money to take down to 8th grade. I mean, we don't have federal money hard enough for 9 to 12, so stretching it down to 8th grade doesn't make a lot of sense for us. But we do encourage middle school participation, and the teacher licensure law changed about 2 or 3 years ago so that some of our high school teachers could teach at middle school. So there are cases, particularly like in agriculture, where there are shared teachers that are building middle school programs, but they're not, mostly what they're doing is introducing the students to the programs. Another big part of this that we will run into as we work with the grants is the student leadership organizations. And those organizations are co-curricular. They are not clubs. And if you want to raise their hackles, call them a club. They will clarify for you immediately.
They'll hit you with their red jacket.
They will hit you. They are fabulous in what they do for students. And it's what used to be Future Farmers of America. It's FFA. There's a marketing one. There's Future Business Leaders of America and Skills USA. And so those programs are attached to these program designs that we're talking about. And that's where students can go, and they have their own organization, they do fundraising, they have leadership training, and they have competitions from local to regional to state to national, and they get scholarships out of the deal. And you get these beautifully polished young people I've had them run state meetings for me. I've had them facilitate teachers around the table. That's how skillful they are. So they are a part of this, and last time they had $500,000 of their own money to give to teachers across the state. And this time they're going to probably show up inside of the CTE revitalization grant. That's going to be interesting. And then we had to make sure that $1 million of the CTE revitalization, in addition, included what we call CTESO, Student Leadership Organization, and $1 million had to include STEM. So now you got this program design, and you've got to include CTESOs, and you've got to include STEM, and you've got to build a facility, and you got to do all these things. It's significant work for $300,000 to $500,000. Yeah, I could spend $150 million just like that. We could. So the grant elements that people are addressing are innovation, programs of study, and you saw the map I showed you right here. Integration of academic and technical content, expansion and growth, experiential learning, partnerships, sustainability. I'll put programs of study twice. Mark, you shouldn't have written it quite so fast. And graduation. That's a lot of work for $300,000 and putting together a facility, but they did a fairly, great job. Those 32 grants, many of them were manufacturing and construction and pre-engineering, and you saw a couple of them were health. There was a graphic arts one. I can't remember if there's a culinary one in there or not. And then several agriculture ones across the state. And my team, we were able to extract from the grant process enough money to have my team do some work. And so we are making 2 visits a year. We go at the beginning of the grant to see how they're getting along, and then we're making a visit right now. And it is not an evaluative visit, but it is a check-in, find out what best practices are. It came out of the idea of finding bright spots. And if you've read one of the books that talks about bright spots, we're looking for what's working. And so the team goes out and visits, and they'll take workforce partners, anybody who wants to go. They come back totally jazzed and excited, and it's amazing what you're seeing out there. And some of you saw it at the Capitol the other day. So
Let me pause for a second. Are there any questions on the phone from any of our board members?
No, this is wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'd love to take you along. I mean, it's everything from, if you've heard about Sherwood and their mobile lab, that they're taking that trailer around the state and training. Bend has done some great things. You've heard about the Dalles. Eastern Oregon, they had students who were training on computers and doing the computer work for the local ESD. We had students who were training for power plant operation in Idaho. So just a whole range of things, and students who are just so excited.
Are you tracking this data?
Oh, yeah. Well, as best we can. Now, see, here's the interesting part. Not all of these CTE revitalization are programs of study yet. And so we're having them report back to us about engagement, students attending. So, when you talk about flexibility, what we tried to do in this revitalization program is provide more flexibility than the structure that we had in our federally funded programs. And it's certainly, like, for example, in our federally funded programs, you can't spend over $5,000 on a piece of capital equipment. You can't put in plumbing or electricity or any of that, but you can do it with CTE revitalization. There's lots and lots of, and again, the grants looked at geographic diversity. Part of it was, I mentioned, tied to student leadership, and part of it was tied to STEM. And what we did, and we said a third of this money must go to the metropolitan areas, and a third of it must go to rural areas. And then the other third were mostly the grants that rose to the top, and then we tried the best. That's where the advisory committee came in significantly, because they actually read the grants, many of them, and so I don't know if you guys are up with that or not, but they actually read those grants, scored them. We had 30 to 40 people scoring those grants. And half of them were business and industry, and half of them were educators. And that was an interesting conversation. It might be a good reality TV show. Because you know how business and you've been in business and industry, and you're looking at the bottom line, and why are you buying 500 iPads? Well, it might be a good reason, and it might not be. It just might be fun money. So that was an interesting conversation, but then the advisory committee sat with us, and we ranked the grants, and they made recommendations, and then we took those to Department of Education, Rob Saxon, and then he approved the awarding of the grants. So a part of my concern too, and I'll share this with you in all honesty, is as we move forward and we try to work together, we cannot delay. We cannot have so much going on between merging STEM and CT and all that we delay the award of grants.
And what's your cycle? Do you have to have them lined up so if you get appropriated in June, that those grants have to start flying out the door in July?
We get appropriated, we find out in June that June 30th, the legislature is closed. The governor doesn't sign the budget until August 1. We cannot release anything. So what we'll start doing now is, with the hopes of getting money, is we're beginning to think about developing RFPs.
Okay.
And we'll start signaling the fields, and we'll start doing online video stuff and saying, we think money's coming in, this is what it might look like. Get your ducks in a row if you think you're going to apply. And then come August, then we have to then have the applications come in. I'm trying to think, September, October, we read, and we get the money out the door by January. That's fast, believe it or not.
And so most of these are missing the first school year of any biennium, and they're really being applied to the second year.
Yeah, the 18 months. But if they, if they're up and running, and they, we can maybe move it up a little bit, but it's hard, because once you find out you have the money, these people are going back to school. They're getting ready for school. The other challenge is going to be is carrying that money over for summer programs. That's going to be another operational challenge, but I was told we could do it.
How do you create the continuum of a program if you don't know and you skip the year?
Exactly. Exactly, and that's why we asked for weighted funding.
Yeah.
Well, and this is one of the reasons I believe that the STEM Investment Fund was established, where we can also be getting corporate and philanthropic dollars to support transitions across those bienniums.
Right.
So it's a resource question. How do you figure out ways to get resources other than money that are needed in the environment And I'm thinking about the fact we've got industry folks that are sitting around the table and may actually have some of the things that you need, but may have never been asked for them.
So in the grants, they're required to have partnerships. Now, I will say to you who are business and industry members, this is a real challenge for schools. They are not accustomed. I know you get knocked on the door for, sports and everything else, but they're not like Don, most of them, except for the Aggies, the agriculture people. They don't know anything about really knocking on the door and asking for money, and they're not trained, teachers are not trained to do that. And principals aren't necessarily trained to do that either. So that's a real, number one, that's a real challenge, but they are required to get partners in that grant process. And if you saw the data up there, it was like 300 and some partners that were brought to the table. So when they come to the table, and it is a challenge for teachers who haven't had this experience to use their business partners effectively and efficiently and make them really feel, it's a challenge. It's not necessarily one they've had in their past. So we require them to have the partners have to sign off on letters, and the partners have an opportunity to help build the design. So if you're sitting at the table and you go, well, I know that, X person has, if you would help them find a piece of equipment, that would be great.
Well, I'm thinking more on a systemic level. So, for example, you say you want to have a wood shop in 20 schools around the state. Well, if each school is going to have to put together their own program and say yada, yada, yada. Yeah, we've got a manufacturing organization over here that says, I'm not going to make one for you, but if you need 20 of these things, we can actually have a conversation about that. And oh, by the way, I have a work slowdown right now, and I'm paying these folks anyway.
Right.
So is there some way that you can actually go to the, basically deliver on some of those services?
I wish. I'm not saying we can't. Again, Virginia would have an equipment budget, and they would list the equipment that you could buy through their procurement process. At least that. And I mentioned that to Brian Craig, and he's going, no, not happening in Oregon. I said, okay, just because of the state structures, not because of anything else. But I would not personally want to have to handle that, but they do have that equipment budget, and so they buy in, multiple, but they also fund it. In terms of connecting with people, there are several. The STEM Council here in Salem has tried to build a web structure where people can connect into it. Business and industry can connect into it, as is the career information system.
Right.
And that is an expected role for our STEM hubs, is to be able to mitigate those partnerships between local business and industry and the schools to reduce the noise and the ask to schools and to just ease that.
Well, and to that point, and it's not but, it's an and, it's really in some ways to transform our ways of thinking about resources.
Sure.
We grapple with it in the nonprofit space as well, where everybody's trying to get money that can be converted into things that people need. You got to think about how many teachers actually go out and buy things out of their own pocket, where that could be. I've been in buildings where there are 50 million pens in that closet over there. Can you actually give them to somebody, because we aren't using them; they dry out, and so it's things like that.
So there is. We do a listserv across the state. So if we knew if someone had something to offer, we would blast that out to our CTE regional coordinators, who would say, I know Hermiston High School needs this, or I know that. And one of the interesting things about this heavy lifting, I'm really worried about your time.
Yeah, we are too.
So let's finish on your slides. Do you have any more slides?
I don't think so. I think I'm done.
Yeah.
Compressed timelines, true partnerships deal with antiquated facilities, they're having to service contractors, managing complex projects, and meeting underserved and sustainability. There are some of the big things that are signed with this.
Part of the sustainability is the teacher workforce issues, right?
Right.
Which are huge.
Yeah.
So, and I would leave you with this thought. This is something that struck with me early in my career, and that's what I think we're doing with CTE and STEM. We're trying to give students roots. Our students who are in CT classes have a home, they have a community, they have a teacher that mentors them, and then they give them the opportunity to move on. So
what does success look like? You have 180,000 kids in the high school system. What does success look like in your mind in terms of CTE and exposure?
I can tell you what the performance measures are. We measure academic attainment in reading and math. We measure academic technical skill attainment. And we measure placement and graduation. That's what that looks like. In the CTE revitalization grants, we're looking at some more subtle things like career choices. I found out about a career. You know, I'm looking at that. We're looking at attendance, so we're looking at those things. But for me, success is that every student in an Oregon high school would have an opportunity to experience something that was meaningful and took them to their highest potential. And that as they left high school, that they had a vision for where they wanted to go or a path. The one thing that I saw when I came to Oregon is I could not find the infrastructure. I was working at OMSI, I was running high-risk youth programs. I couldn't find the infrastructure to attach students to. And it is, CTE used to be that infrastructure, and now it only serves a portion of the students. And so that's something that I think we consider. But I think we have an opportunity and we have an interested legislature. I just think we have to work at it very hard. And hopefully they remain interested and that it doesn't.
So if you had 180, how many CTE credits does that look like? And kind of, he back up, I get a scale, I need to get a scale of how big this is that, when you think about the end state, we tend to get caught in the here and now.
Problem.
Yeah, we kind of deal with the here and now, which is what we are, but
Right.
if you think about it, this is a successful
We were looking
ecosystem
at
with
10 to 11,000 students that had 3 or more credits.
There you go. Yeah, and there's.
And that's what the weighted funded proposal is based
And a
on.
portion of the CTE revitalization ask is to have a formula change that supports these programs long-term.
Mhm.
That is based on not a 3-credit success, but a 9 or 12.
No,
what was it?
no.
No.
Our proposal for weighted funding
Yeah.
said if a student attained 3 credits in an approved program, they would get an additional 0.1 weight.
That's what.
If they were underserved, they would get additional 0.1. And if they made progress toward an industry credential, they would get a 0.1 weight.
Brilliant. Let the system do it itself, right?
incentivize the system.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, so this has been very, I'm sure we'll have more conversations on this. Any final questions from anyone on the phone? Okay, thank you so much.
I'm sorry
very
that I
cool.
know.
No, this is really helpful because I think there is this nexus between CT and STEM very close. I'm one of those kids who went through the system too, and you know, I got the stuff on the left, but I was doing the stuff on the right, which was the fun stuff. Yeah, so thank you. Sounds like Dwayne was too. Sounds like he all had that kind of experience. Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item. And then we moved preparing for the 2015-17 investments. Let's do that after the Oregon Talent Council. Just a quick update on where we are, and Eric's going to do that because he's fresh in his mind. He's been a yeoman and a champion of this effort. I've been impressed what you've been able to accomplish, Eric.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We'll be very quick. What is our time here?
We're just about 15 minutes.
All right. I will.
Yeah, 15.
Yeah, that'd be 10, 15
Okay.
minutes.
Well, obviously, many of you in the room are familiar with this because you just walked over from the House Committee on Higher Education, Innovation, and Workforce, where House Bill 2728 was formally introduced. We had a phenomenal turnout. Thank you, Jim and Brent, for being there and supporting with your testimony. Basically, most, I believe, on the council are familiar with ETIC and what it's been doing over the last 17 years. Ultimately, the Oregon Talent Council would replace ETIC, so ETIC would sunset. And I don't need to go through all the slides that are actually attached. I think what you need to know, essentially, is we're taking what's best of ETIC, enhancing it and expanding its mission, and we're taking some of the weaknesses that were inherent within ETIC and we're trying to eliminate or minimize those as much as possible. The Oregon Talent Council would reside within the Oregon the Oregon Employment Department, which has a history of having a really good pulse on where jobs and how talent demands are moving within the state of Oregon. Better traditionally than what the higher education system has been able to accomplish. And in some degree, their data is a little more real. She was just, I think Laura was, Laura was just asking about, gosh, I wish I could track students and where they end up. Well, the fact of the matter is the Oregon Employment Department can and does track students and where they end up in regards to their careers and their jobs. So there's a really great amount of data that I think a talent council led by industry could tap into there. And again, the role here is to advise the educational system, post-secondary education system, on where they ought to be investing their time and effort in aligning their efforts with industry needs. So it's a big ask. It's $15 million that's being requested in new money. That money would be granted out through an RFP process or competitive process to private institutions, to community colleges, and to the four-year public institutions within the state to meet critical needs. Unlike ETIC, which was solely focused on the high-tech community for the most part, this would bring in other critical industry sectors, including energy, agriculture, manufacturing, healthcare, that all have significant talent gaps in their futures, or actually most of them right this instant. I think this came to being when we were talking about the future and how to make ETIC relevant to the future. I think when we got together in a room and started talking about it, we just realized there was just a golden opportunity to expand the mission and take it forward in a different manner. Long ways to go. We just introduced the bill in committee. It's got to go through an amendment process within committee. Hopefully it will be voted out, and then it has the dubious honor of going to joint ways and means, where the money questions are starting to be asked. So by no means, Jim, am I going to let you off the hook in regards to your testimony. We're probably going to have to continue to lobby and really make a case for why not only the OTC, but the CT revitalization and the STEM investments that we're proposing, how they all work together in a common goal to improve the state. Any questions about the OTC or where we stand?
Eric, I have a question.
Yes.
Can you give me an example of what a successful grant candidate would look like out of this program?
Yeah, I can tell you right now, for example, that ETIC goes through a similar process timing-wise in regards to requesting for proposals and then pre-sorting them, then finding out if we have the money for them, and then rolling the money out into the system. So right now we have over 85 proposals that are actually being worked through the system right now in case OTC gets funded. Those grants are dramatic and wide-ranging, but for example would be, let's see here, what would be a good one? Let me go back to my favorite one from history. The University of Oregon was looking for an opportunity to provide a master's degree in something related to science that would support industry. They went out and did some research, market research, and found out there were 3 particular areas in high tech that were clamoring for master's grade graduates. One of those was optical, one of those was materials, and one of them was in semiconductors. They then came to ETIC with a proposal to put together a master's program that was heavy on internships and real life experiences, and proposed that they needed $2 million to be able to hire a professor, outfit a few labs, and have a coordinator to run the program. That program would be self-sufficient in the sense that it would operate off the tuition that it actually brought in, which is unique in the higher education system. They had an internal agreement with the University of Oregon that got signed off by their board of trustees and their president and provost. Ultimately, that program started, and it started very modestly and had just about 10, 15 folks involved. In the first 2 years, they graduated about 30 people, and all 30 people essentially had jobs in the state of Oregon at the end of the internship program. They came back to ETIC, said, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we did with your money. If we had a little bit more, we could expand this and we could make it larger and more inclusive of more industries and more areas of the state of Oregon. They did so, and ETIC did continue to fund it for expansion purposes. And now that program, I can't remember the numbers that are coming out. Maybe Laura can shout one out. Do you remember what OMI is producing right now? About 70.
70 is what I was saying.
About 70 master's level students that are coming out of that program in these 3 areas, and they're expanding the areas now, and 97% placement. And these are $80,000 generally starting jobs in critical areas in the state of Oregon. So those types of innovative grants that pull from industry what their true needs are, create and tailor a program to it, and then perform. Another example simply could be in the sense of increasing the capacity for a program where mechanical engineering or power engineering does not have enough capacity for the number of students that need to go through it. The hiring packages to be in place. The difference between how ETIC operated and how the OTC is scheduled to operate, though, is that ETIC would often sustain the program forever. In regards to once we hired a professor with ETIC money, ETIC then paid for it year after year after year. The OTC money is meant to be a greenfield investment fund. It's like venture capital, it's like angel money. It's meant to go in and start up programs that the universities have designated as being able to be supportive, either through self-supporting through tuition, or ultimately the university just embraces it enough that they support it through their own funding streams. Does that answer your question?
Wonderful, that's really helpful, thank you, Eric. And this sounds that, now I understand why you're saying you're taking the best of the ETIC and applying it to OTC. It makes perfect sense in terms of helping support that strategic alignment between industry and academia, which oftentimes can often be sometimes a difficult barrier to breach.
We definitely work on different frequencies of what is urgent and what is not, and obviously I think one of the best things that industry can do is bring that sense of urgency associated with these problems, and hopefully help give some solutions as well.
I suspect the key part of the grant then is to be able to demonstrate that it can be self-sustaining after the greenfield money is presented.
And that was part of what a weakness of ETIC is what happened if we made all these investments and then we went, okay, this isn't working very well, or more importantly, this isn't relevant anymore to the economy or otherwise. And I fully believe that OTC will fund, spin up, meet demand, and then spin back down these investments as the state's economy changes and moves. And that is a very difficult thing to do within normal bounds of the education system.
Well, I think you bring up a very important point, especially when you talk about this like from a venture capitalist perspective, right? Because, at the end of the day, there are multiple funders in the deal. Okay, so to actually get other people looking at this and expecting to pay for part of this down the road would be a really good thing. So when we're saying we're funding a program like an engineering master's program with equipment, and we're looking at what the industry outcomes would be on the other side of it, it might be that there are industry folks that are there, it might be that there are really community folks that are there, there might be some federal grant programs that we tie into it, but we already can spur that thinking and maybe even have some of those people in the conversation early.
Well, the thing that bothered me the most about ETIC was the fact that we started being a huge percentage of the engineering budgets, and therefore, any operational flexibility that the ETIC Council had vaporized, right? Unless we went and found new money from the state. And you get to a certain size of a program, you're not going to get new money from the state. I mean, they say you've got your $29 million, go deal with it, even though we had literally only a little bit of slack in that to actually do anything new and innovative. So we're making sure that piece does not reoccur, and that is going to take some due diligence by the executive director, by our own OED, and a lot of people to keep our eye on that ball, because there will be pressures, because you make an investment in something, you get it started, and then if it's not being supported by them, you don't want it to die, right? You don't want it to go away.
Sometimes you do.
But sometimes you do.
Sometimes you do.
And so therefore the mechanism mechanism needs to be the same, no
Yeah.
matter, and
Right.
there's good outcomes and bad outcomes. So I'm very, very positive that, I mean, we got tremendous support across from all the different industries that are interested. I mean, it was a great day. 17 people testified, another 17 would have if we had more time. We got great letters of support. Most of the larger business associations in the state of Oregon support this. It will ultimately just come down to a Ways and Means call and whether or not we get the $15 million or not.
Any other questions from the members on the phone, committee members? Council members?
I have a couple of things. Just another comment to this is seeing this, these funds coming through the OTC complement. I mean, those are the short-term sort of startup funds for programs, short duration, right? There's also a complementary effort within the new HEC funding formula to ensure that there's sustainable dollars. So for those programs that are aligned to high-wage, high-demand career or degrees aligned to those careers, that they would get additional funding so long as there is that alignment. When the alignment goes away, the HEC's waiting funding would go away. So it's similar to what we're trying to do with the CTE revitalization, is you've got startup funds for programs through the revitalization grants, but you want some systemic sustainability funds to keep those programs going. So
And
I
I
think
want
that
to see,
that's an
I want
important
to see those
piece.
sustaining funds to have to go through some sort of an airlock though as well, because
Yeah.
just because it happened, I don't want them suddenly to become ingrained. I think there needs to be a blessing of some sort. So one of the roles of the council is to make sure that the programs after they get started still have legitimacy in year 3, and whether or not they should be recommended for inclusion in sustaining funds or not, because I can tell you right now, when we told the universities for the very first time that we were only going to be your startup, they said, well, we can't do anything with just startup funds. All right, well, then you don't need to apply. Oh, well, okay, now suddenly they got very, very creative in regards to how they can sustain programs. So it is about putting the challenge out in front of folks, and you will find the U of O's and other innovative programs finding that solution. So
If there's a demand, then they can meet this.
if there's not a demand, there has to be a question on whether or not it should exist.
And this
Okay.
is where the alignment with other agencies is so critical between the OTC and the HEC and the STEM Investment Council is to be thinking about, and I don't know whether, Chair, we want to spend any time about talking about how we would align the OTC with the STEM Investment Council work, or whether we want to put that into a future conversation.
I think it's a good future conversation as the OTC evolves and stuff, but there clearly is that alignment. Again, as I look at the STEM Council, we're providing the pipeline, into the process and where it's going to come. The kids have to get through 4th and 8th grade math, they have to have CTE, they have to have a lot of these skill sets to even get into these kinds of careers that are going to be successful.
The only question I'd ask the council is, I assume the council is very comfortable us writing the STEM Investment Council into statute as one of the advisory councils to the OTC. I'm assuming that is okay.
And we'll want to think about, if we're reconstituting the STEM CTE Investment Council, similar language that asks us to, then align with.
And again, if you look, actually, it's very interesting on the CTE mission. If you look at many of the professions who are now talking about bringing into the fold of the OTC, you're talking about energy and you're talking about healthcare. A lot of that work falls actually under the domain of CTE and not necessarily just STEM.
Okay. Any other questions on that topic? Great progress, Mark, and Eric, and everyone who's worked on this thing and trying to get things aligned. So we'll see how it unfolds. And it is that the money conversation will be the next big challenge. So look forward to that.
Always is.
And I assume that if I don't hear anything from the STEM Council, I assume we're supportive of being a ex officio member of this OTC. Anyone opposed to that? Okay, next topic on the agenda is preparing for the 2015-2017 investments. There is a proposal that we would get granting funds to invest in programs that have the capability to scale up and align with the goals and objectives we're trying to achieve. And so we've started thinking ahead about how that's all going to happen in the process to do that. So I'm going to have Mark give us his thoughts on that and let the council react to what he's thinking about in this area.
Yeah, well, I really wanted to open up the conversation more generally rather than necessarily putting forward a model. I think you've heard there's certainly places where we need to be thinking about how we manage and direct these funds as a council. from decision-making through administration, through really taking an investment management approach to this, that we've got a portfolio of investments, and what are we learning from those, and how do those then feed back into future investments and policy, is the type of thing that we would need to put into place. That obviously requires substantial investment, I think, in personnel. Personnel associated with, you've heard Laura Roach, having the staff who are able to go out and do 2 field visits to provide technical assistance, understand what are the challenges with that particular investment, what are they learning from that investment, and then to feed it back into the larger system. Right now we have a 0.7 person at the Department of Education, Joe Shiro. 0.6. and she's highly capable, but we can't ask, there's just no bandwidth to manage investments in the way that investments need to manage. So I want to talk to us as a group about what are those things that we can put in place, what are the potential pitfalls of that, and how we might, what questions do I need to be asking of the agencies in order to make this an effective investment strategy.
Well, I apologize because I was one of the authors of the bill that created the STEM Investment Council, so I should probably know this answer, but I don't believe we wrote in that you couldn't use any of our budget for administrative. Is that correct? Is that?
We certainly can't reimburse the STEM Council members for anything.
No, that will never,
also kind of ludicrous.
That will never happen,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But again, if you look at the language that we're proposing in OTC, there's language in there that basically says of the $15 million that we're asking for, up to, not a hard number, but up to a certain percentage of that money can be used for the day-to-day administration and payment of general administrative costs. I don't believe we wrote that in regards to the STEM Council, which is a mistake. And it doesn't have, as you saw, in fact, Laura had some on her pie chart, I don't know if you noticed there, she had administrative costs up there on her piece, and they kept it at 3%. And they're doing very frugally. They must be obviously getting money from other sources. But those numbers, 3, 5, 7%, generally will move through the system relatively easily through the legislature. It's not being unreasonable for the oversight of the program.
Is there a chance with the rewrite of the CT STEM to get some language in there to address that issue?
I brought that up with Senator Dembrow in the hallway after committee, and you can see the wheels turning. I don't think yes, the answer is yes, and the wheels were turning politically in his head.
How do I get this in?
Yeah, and is there money for it? But again, if we're willing as a council to eat a little of our seed corn to pay the farmer, so to speak, then why not?
Yeah, I think it comes down to how are we seeing, if we're truly seeing this as investments or just grants administration. So grants administration you can do frugally, that's what the Department of Education is doing right now. Grants management and investment management requires an entirely different level of thinking, of research, of knowledge capture and dissemination. I think the challenge, I think there is language in the bill pertaining to the STEM Investment Fund, which isn't funded. There's a fund in the bill that's established under the Treasury Department for the STEM Council to administer funds. Right now, the STEM recommendations in the governor's recommended budget are coming through 2 agency budgets, one to the OEIB and one to the Department of Education.
Which piece goes to the OEIB?
The $7.9 million.
So that would be the question, because it's obviously much closer to you.
Yes.
Can we tax, so to speak, the 7.9 in such a meaningful way that we get our support?
Maybe. I think we'll have to get creative. I don't yet know the constraints in terms of staffing levels. There is concern, certainly right now, to be very candid, with the OEIB as not an implementation agency. So why staff up building additional bureaucracy.
Sure.
So there's a perception as staff levels rise that there's
So that's the OEIB
Yes.
pathway, thank you very much. Okay, now let's talk about the OED pathway in regards to making sure that there's an understanding that they have to give back in regards to the administration of the overall funds. I mean, there's, again, I don't think this is, you just need some people that have done this.
I think we would want that to include
Yeah,
it.
and I think, to your point, I don't think there's any, it's not unreasonable, and Senate Bill 112 goes forward, it's a public process, we can drop any amendment suggestions we want on it, and properly debate them in committee if necessary. But I just think we're hamstringing your ability to get this council moving and being able to be effective, even if just with our limited mission of STEM. You bring CTE on top of this, I mean, you're gonna need some help.
So you think about process-wise, where we are in this budget process, building on what Laura talked about, the soonest we would know we actually really have funds is August. Now, there might be early indications there, because you said the governor doesn't sign the budget.
That's it, you're waiting to see if he vetoes.
Vetoes it,
Or
right.
she vetoes.
Yeah.
Shut up.
So,
And, yeah.
so the question is, we'll know through the July, maybe we'll know whether we've got some dollars in the budget, and then just to make it official in August when the governor signs the budget. So we'll have some indication, so we got to ramp up. If we see in July that that funds are going to be allocated for this, gearing up a process, letting people know. But even at the best, it's going to take, you're going to miss a cycle here before we can, maybe summer of 16 before you can actually.
Well, I think one of the major concerns, certainly within the STEM hubs, is exactly this discontinuity across the biennium regarding funding. And some are in a situation where they're supported by institutions which have dollars that if there's a promise and a future within the bills, and it looks like it's going to pass, would float the operations. Unfortunately, many of the hubs, particularly the nascent ones, the nascent ones don't have funding anyway. So some of the things that we've talked about is how do we get ahead of the game, putting out RFP processes early on, so that, or draft language of RFPs and actually co-developing those RFPs with our field partners, so that they know what's likely to come down the pipe,
Yeah, I think
so that they can prepare their response and we can have a rapid
it's the same
turnaround.
thing that ETIC's done and what.
Right, exactly.
These guys
Building
do.
that
You have to have it all in the can, waiting to go,
Exactly.
in case you get it, right?
And can we use some of those materials that have been developed already and modify them, or at least learn from what the best practices are, rather than trying to recreate the wheel?
Is there an existing infrastructure that we might use in the short term?
Like what?
Well, I mean, I don't know if the education folks have something, or Business Oregon, or even, ETIC's existing infrastructure. So, for example, we might have a short-term approach where we deal with how we manage the funds for the next year and a half, per se, with the intention of being able to actually staff it wherever it appropriately needs to be staffed.
I think I understand where you're going. I think that the comment I would make would be, this isn't a new problem. There's a lot of groups out there that live and die on the appropriations game, waiting for June to see what happens. And it's a sad comment is that many times these types of programs are the very last things funded, because these are the nice to haves, not necessarily all the time the need to haves. So I think there's some best practices here that we should try to come up with our own solution here. We should be able to go find some folks that are dealing with the same reality and understand how they deal with it.
I'll put that as an action
Yeah,
item.
I mean, CTE folks, it's obviously creator process, ETIC creator process,
Yeah.
those are good things to work as a template and rigor.
So for example, it would be, in a perfect world, we'd be going through a process right now of going through the grant proposals on the proposed new STEM hubs. We would actually have a down select probably in the May time frame that we walk into the legislature and say, if you give us the money, by the way, these 5 or 6 STEM hubs would stand up, because we went through this process to identify them and pre-vet them. It's going to cost exactly $5.2 million to do so, or whatever the number is. It gives it a very concrete expenditure when they're getting down to how many dollars are you going to give a program. Because what you'll find is if you do that, they'll say, okay, well, we can't give you enough for 5, but, here's enough for 3. And they'll drop the money, decision money that way. But anyhow, I think we just need to go find some best practices.
So,
And I'd start right there.
yeah, okay. Any other thoughts from members on the phone? Questions? Okay, so we're gonna send Mark away to do a little homework on finding, as limited staff he is, or maybe someone else can lean on someone to get some of what that material looks like. It seems like there's 2 fundings here too. There's one is the STEM hubs, which we asked for about $5 million for. That's probably a much quicker process in terms of how we move that forward,
Yes.
because those are existing,
Known
known
processes.
quantity. The grant program is much different and is broader. Yeah. You got a question, folks?
I don't know, let's check.
Question on the phone?
Well, I agree with you, and I would,
That was just me.
oh, there it is.
Hi, Thompson.
Oh, we're missing your,
Sorry, Eric, I was just going to reinforce the importance for doing this, that unless we have, if we are going to be truly an investment council, we have to be very strategic with our investments. And a key piece of that is being able to align them and leverage, because we have very limited resources. And unless we are able to be very smart about how each of those investments can be leveraged and multiplied throughout the state, we won't be successful. So I don't see that. I see this as a compelling piece of what we need to go forward in terms of our discussion with the legislature.
the STEM grant section, the 7.9 million piece, I guess I would, from a practical standpoint, Mark, I would try to get someone's temperature in regards to their tolerance for us taking 8 months or a year of figuring out where that money would then go. Because I do also realize that from our work at ETIC, there was always extreme pressure to be granting as soon as possible into the new biennium. Because if you don't get the money out and you carry fund balances, that ends up being a very bad thing. And like people come grab your money back, and you're not seen as being responsible in regards to the process. So we may need to very well tell a story about that 7.9 needing some time, needing some.
Not the hubs, but the other.
Not the hubs. The hubs, I think we're sound on. Like
Yeah.
I said, we've done this. We know that we can stand them up. We know what it's going to look like when it happens. But the 7.9 grant money is a little bit blurry, and we're going to need to have a compelling case to say what kinds of things it would be used for, but without being able to point specifically to the legislature and say there or there.
And just to give you a sense of what I'm currently thinking and having talked with some of the STEM hubs about in terms of the funding is to possibly think about the STEM hub funding in 4 different ways that each might have a different degree of flexibility associated with it. One is funding for the backbone operations, so staffing, communications, a certain number of FTE per hub based on perhaps their impact or their community and their sense of readiness, right? So there's a readiness to benefit piece that needs to be there. 2, programming, which is likely to be associated with a more competitive process. 3, what about those? Certain hubs have an expertise where the other hubs can benefit. So kind of a larger systemic addressing the needs of the system as a whole and having an application for example, our South Metro Salem STEM partnership is creating this platform. They don't have the capacity. They're taking that out of their current program funds, but it has the potential to benefit the state as a whole. So shouldn't we be funding those differently, or allowing for additional funds? And then finally, sort of some short-term technical assistance that might be needed. That's a much more adaptive funding.
Well, this is a very painful thing to me to listen to because, it seems indicative of a systemic problem
Yeah.
we have. I mean, you don't run a fund this way. We're going to do this 2-year look that's out of sync with the application of dollars, and we're basically reinforcing that system. It's part of the reason why, the 10-year look was really important. It may not be the time now, but can we actually start looking at how we might put together, even if it's a 6-year fund, that gives us the ability to have a stable funding platform that we can apply to the measures at hand.
I think as so long as it comes through agency budgets, we will
Yeah.
continue to face this. Many other states have started statewide nonprofits and sought funding in other ways to add that kind of flexibility in the system.
So the funds that we've kind of earmarked for the programs, that's not going into a fund that can be invested over a period of time? It has to be spent within the 2 years and it goes away? Or
I
does it go
believe
to,
so,
or can
yes.
it go to the treasurer's office and say, that's the fund for this program?
That's a bad thing, I'm sorry.
And-
We would probably need to talk to Ted Wheeler's office, because ultimately, usually those kinds of funds are swept back. Fund balances can be carried. We have an expert in the room if we want to talk about this. I mean, Joe was in the heart of this with OPAS and a little bit. Did you spend all of OPAS's money every 2 years that you got? I mean, or did you guys, were you able to carry fund balances?
Bruce carried fund balances, Laura did not.
Yeah, Bruce squirreled away some money.
Were those private or were those state funds?
I believe
State.
all the dollars were state dollars.
Mhm.
The public-private match went directly to universities.
Yeah. The process, also you were in great position to know, what was the granting process from start to finish on OPAS grants? How long did it take?
That depended, but I'd say it usually took from, I think the shortest we ever did was about 7 weeks. I think the longest was more like 10. However, OPAS granted based on contracts with 2 disbursements over the biennium. And sometimes written into those contracts where you can have these activities past the end of the biennium,
Okay.
which I believe, because ODE runs on a reimbursement system, I believe is a much harder lift.
Okay. There you go. That's part of your answer right there. So, the treasurer's office is key.
We'll
Yes.
address that question.
OUS was not operating under DAS rules for at least the last part of my tenure,
Which enabled that fund balance then.
which may have enabled the fund balance, which may have enabled writing the
I
contract.
know that the
Yes.
fund balance was problematic, let's just put it that way. When we
It raised eyebrows.
Did ETIC have the same problem?
Well, ETIC, no, not nearly to the same extent. ETIC certainly has some fund balance occasionally, but we usually get rid of it before the end of the session. Just like any zero-based balance budget, if you don't spend it, you're likely to get it reduced from the next cycle.
Yeah, it's the certainty of having it for the time when so much programming is going on within our hubs in that summertime. That is, that's a critical period for continuity of these programs, and we have to solve it, so.
Yeah, so 1 year is going to solve, you can't fund a program for 1 year and then go
No.
away, that's just not,
It's boom and bust, and
people get it.
Well, that's the whole complaint about grant programs, right? Is that
yeah.
you gotta find that sustainable piece.
We have a question.
Yeah.
Sure,
Sure.
sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that we could do on the nonprofits is if we gave a tax credit where companies, et cetera, could pump that in, basically direct a portion of their taxes like they kind of do now, but they could actually make that as a line item. And then that would give us a little bit of seed money that we could use and keep the.
To bridge,
keep the non-
it's a bridging
It
dollars.
would be a bridging dollar. I'm sure it would get consumed pretty quickly, but it could give us with a tax credit.
Well, and if
Money
we-
people, gotta go find some money people.
We need some money people, so if people have some government money people, I'm not sure, we've looked around the Department of Education a little bit. I'll
I
talk to
would-
Cindy Hunt, I think she would
Yeah.
be the one who.
I'd say maybe Kathy will be willing to
Okay.
grant.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I honestly, Representative Reed would be a great person to talk to as well. He may direct you down. He's been involved with that side of the fence a lot. Not necessarily on the education side, but certainly on economic development.
Well,
He understands.
And Representative
funds.
Comp as well.
Yeah, Comp would be, well,
She
Comp
she would
is
know.
already actively proposing, bills in this next session to bridge some of these problems that have occurred with OPAS disappearing. So Yeah, she'd be excellent. She's very sympathetic to your ups.
Okay, so let's, we got the subcommittee reports. We're gonna.
Oh, sure.
Yes, sir. So let's do a quick subcommittee report. Okay, so Mark's got some guidance here. We'll work on that. I'll talk to Barnum, my lobbyist, too, to see what he can do.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Thompson, you want to give us a quick update on strategic planning? You there?
Yes, I can. I'm very happy to do that. So we have been meeting and developing out the, moving from the manifesto to the goals to the actual strategic plan. Next session, we're actually diving into the details of how would we implement different key strategies for implementing the plan. And as we kind of are pulling together these tactical elements about the plan, this is when we're going to be ready to bring this back for review, back to the council for input. But the process so far started with developing a visionary goal, and that was when we sought to define this as a manifesto, and that within that we wanted to be able to have something that we could all begin to align all the assets within the state toward this common goal. And then from that, moving them down very much to the practical elements about how it is that we're putting the strategies in place, including aspects such as the STEM hubs and other key pieces of our long-term strategy here. This is meant to be distilled down to a very succinct document that all of us can go out into the community and say, this is where we're going, and this is how we're going to get there. Are you going to join us in that journey?
So just give a sense of schedule. When do you think you'll have something to share with the overall council?
I've looked to have that, we look to have that in about, at the outset, between 4 to 8 weeks. So my hope is that, and Mark, I would like you to weigh in as well, but my hope is that we will be able to have an initial draft ready for our next council that we could begin to review together.
Great.
As a preliminary document, and then we would be taking that back and fleshing out the details and have a review document ready for our following council meeting.
Yeah. One of the things that we talked about this last meeting is after this next iteration of goals and strategies, bringing it to this council and then putting it out into the field very widely to the people who joined us for the STEM Leadership Summit last April, as well as to the folks with the STEM hubs and their networks, as well as the Science Teachers Association, the Math Teachers Association, Computer Science Teachers Association. So we're getting really a lot of on-the-ground perspectives out in the field to make sure that we're really in line with implementation efforts.
Great.
And of course, the CTE Employers Coalition, CTE STEM Employers Coalition as well.
Okay, thank you, Thompson. Any questions by anyone on the council on that? Good progress, very important work. Data and metrics. Lisa.
Yes, thanks, Jim. So, Mark helped me greatly post our last meeting. I had to do that remotely as well, but that video, so this is much improved. We had a good turnout, got into some details of other data and metrics and ideas and talking about it. Where we left it was finding that to go into depth to better understand a couple of those key reports that are out so that you can move that idea and take it back to the council. I'd say our training is very similar to what Thompson just went through as far as having some forward-looking timelines and plans. Mark, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, one of the action items that came out of that was to have a small group, notably Laura McQuaid and John Tapania and Brandon Turner, look at the Brookings Institute report and to come back, which seems very promising, but to look at that and to see whether or not there are limitations or can we get the data, those kinds of data within our own system to map that out, and what would be the implications then for employment projections, et cetera, that we currently have underway. So some good stuff there.
very hopeful that we can work closely with the Oregon Employment Department as well, now that we understand some of their capabilities of, in aggregate, but still important, understanding
Yeah.
what the end results are, the true end results are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
much stronger.
The other thing I wanted to add to that was I received some very good information from the OTC tech folks in Laura. So Eric, you're probably aware of that, but I do have that information as well as setting up some meetings with folks like Oregon Tech and the Central Oregon STEM Hub here and some others to pull in what those folks are looking at and think are valuable metrics, so we can wrap some of that effort into the overall STEM.
Really good. Good progress. Really encouraging on the Brookings Institute. I think it's a really good report and a good way to think about STEM. Thank you very much, Lisa. And finally, Eric, I know it's still in the infant stage, but kind of what we said.
Well, it's much clearer what our goals are, I think, now that we've kind of gotten to today, in the sense that some major decisions have been made in regards to a key piece. So 2 pieces, advocacy, and then I'll talk about communications. From an advocacy standpoint, now that OTC is essentially being championed by the Oregon Employment Department, that kind of changes our tenor in regards to a portion or a third of our legislative ask. So instead of having $9 million in that bucket, we're down to $2.9 million in that bucket. So that now clarifies to me that particular portion of the ask. So I'm meeting today with Senator Devlin, who's the co-chair of Ways and Means, to talk about his budget. As everybody in the room probably knows, but there's a process where the 2 co-chairs put together a suggested funding bucket for everything that they hear out there. They put forward about $60 million to go into these types of events. I think there's probably $100 million of programs being stuffed in a 180 into a $60 million bucket. So it will be interesting to hear today what some of his priorities are and what some of the other lobbyings that he is hearing for that. We have to figure out how our ask is going to move through the legislative process now. It is part of the base OEIB and ODE and HEC budget, I believe. But there's obviously, with the governor rotating here, there's some question on where that budget is, how strong it's going to be. And it's always true that the co-chair's budget is the document that you live and die on. So it's very important to hear a little bit of where they're going with things. Senator Devlin is renowned for not showing his cards, but at the same time, we have a pretty good history with him, and hopefully we'll have an understanding. So I'm going in there today not to talk just about OTC at all. I'm going in there today to also ask him about what his knowledge of the STEM investment portion of the portfolio is as well. I'll be able to report back on that.
That would be fantastic. And
Yep.
to encourage the governor's recommended budget in
Yeah.
CTE and STEM. moving
Absolutely, which ultimately will tell us what kind of work we have to do, like we did today for the OTC. Do we need to have a STEM day in Salem sometime during this session, where we bring in the kids and we bring in the industry and we bring in everybody and we get in front of committee and we advocate. So that's that. Communications piece is a longer term piece that I am anxious to see what's coming out of strategic planning, because that manifesto will be the core marketing document. Obviously, that will be setting up a lot of the verbiage and a lot of the messaging that we'll need to do. So that will be exciting to see, and we can obviously get engaged in that fully once we have that. Good report out.
And just a piece of information I got, and I don't know, I'm sure it's probably, but I did hear from my lobbyists that they are thinking about where are there potential new sources of revenue to fund this on a dedicated basis, so that we don't end up with this binge and purge kind of situation.
Absolutely.
And so business license fees were one of those ideas that are being discussed and kicked around to create a additional business license fee that would be allocated, that could be tied to this.
Yeah, the challenge always in the state is if you create a new revenue source, is how do you guarantee that revenue source will go there forever?
Exactly.
Because the next legislative session will just move it. Lottery funds used to only go to one thing, now they go to 50 things. But it's a great way, and I think the business community and those members on the phone that are members of that, we have to be willing to pay the freight. We're asking for something.
That's right.
We have to be willing in some manner to probably pony up some new dollars. I did have a positive conversation with Representative Davis about this. He has some ideas of perhaps some new money. The question is, and it was significant money, the question is what's his priority? Is his priority CTE? Is his priority STEM? Is it spreading it across all of them? We'll have to see. So there's some interesting moves to go. The kicker obviously also kicked, or is scheduled to kick, which causes a significant hole in the budget as well. And I can tell you from talking to leadership, they're doing some things around that as well to mitigate that problem perhaps. But that is a political lift that is going to be fascinating to watch over the next couple months. People like their money, so it'll be hard to keep it back from them. Anyhow, long story short, we have many months to go here. It will be nothing but interesting.
Yeah. Two things to add. One is that there's conversations amongst the hubs to establish a national or a statewide STEM day in the early part of May, in alignment with Georgia. So Portland Metro is doing that. So I think having that, or a STEM week with activities in each of the regions associated with that, I think would be fantastic, and get a legislative declaration or a governor's declaration of a STEM
I will say this: my only hesitancy of asking for that stronger 5 minutes ago was that I feared it was going to reflect back and I was going to be putting it together. And I don't have the bandwidth to do so. If we can have our constituency get together and do it, the STEM hubs would be the perfect ones to lead it because they got the kids.
And their local
legislators. Man, I'm telling you, if we can do it, I would highly recommend it. We've talked about trying to do it just in an ad hoc way at an upcoming robotics event. But that's not going to be nearly as powerful as if we get those kids down here to Salem and flood those halls.
Well, we're talking about actually having them in the regions, but we can have it here too. It would be nice.
You can do both.
I think we can do both.
Because,
If it's a STEM week, and then...
Well, if you do it in the regions, that gives the local representatives a chance to stand in front of those groups of people.
They're going to be here, though.
But they're not going to be there until after the session's over. So
what
what you need to be able to do is catch them when they get out of committee and they're walking back to their offices, right? And that's when those kids can have forum.
And make it clear that their kids from the region are here.
Yeah.
They want to stop by, not that they...
Yeah, and I would also, as we look at advocacy, and we do find ourselves perhaps in a position to testify, Jim gets 5 minutes, we're going to give kids an hour, right? I mean, the key is to get the kids in here. We have some compelling stories to tell.
Yeah. The other thing that I just wanted to say, Eric, publicly is you spoke so passionately yesterday at the Saturday Academy board session around the need to market these initiatives to kids and to adults. And so we really need to be thinking about how we market, not just to legislators for the advocacy piece, but in terms of supply and demand, it's the supply side that's really concerning me right now. So
I told Mark the story. I went to an 8th grade class and I asked how many kids what an engineer was. No answer, not a clue.
Yeah.
I said, name your parents' engineers, none. And so they don't even see that as a career pathway. So we talked about engineering, then we had them do a project, hands-on learning, and they learned so much. And these kids got exposed to it, but these children have no clue where the pathway is. And the teacher, to his credit, said, these kids don't have a clue where their careers are going.
Well, and they often, the first time they think they might want to be doing it is in college, where they're not prepared to be able to do it, and they crater at too high of a level. One thing that was concerning that Laura said is that all these programs aren't reaching down because they've got enough they're at capacity.
you're not going to miss.
Well, I'll tell you what, then OTC needs to work on increasing their capacity so that they feel like they need to continue to pour downward, and we'll work on that.
Yeah, and she and I have had conversations, so the revitalization, and Representative Reardon has been very clear on this as well, is that the CTE revitalization funds should not just be going to high school. So the federal funds are limited by 8th grade, but the CTE revitalization needs to reach down.
I remember the foundry and the wood shop, the metal shop in middle school just as much as I do going in high school. So.
Well, I think there's an important point there, which is that if you're seeing at the community colleges, and that's that the skills that it takes to retrain people, it's a lifelong thing. Right, so, on one hand, we can talk about the kids, but I mean, this is a challenge that all ages are grappling with in this economy, right? How do I manage to maintain my skills? So if we're talking about the economy of the state, we have to be able to support all the people that are involved.
And I hope we made that point in the OTC, is that there is
It's an
going to have to
incumbent
be.
workforce as well.
Yeah, it's got to be. And that's the nice part about being in workforce, right? Is that they're going to have a different view of this. Yes, it's important for kids coming out of the schools, but it's also important for the existing Oregonians.
Okay, great, good reports on the committees. We're going to take public comment in just a minute, but one thing you guys raised, and I think we ought to think about moving forward, is, and since we're going towards funding, these hubs are really important because they do show progress. We've got certain funded which could show up, but do we need to at least tap those other hubs that wanted funding to kind of revitalize them a little bit, say, hey, we're asking for money, get your application together, get them stimulated a little bit, say, we would hope to fund you if the legislature comes through. And
Talk to your legislators.
Talk to your legislature, but also get your proposals in. So, because we don't have to wait, I mean, the grants are going to be a little more challenging. It's going to take some sales, because we've got to kind of say what we want. But the hubs are ready and going. We've got hubs who need funding going forward. We got to tell them, tell us what you need and kind of the 4 things you talked about, and then get the other ones going. So we can have this body of stuff. We can move quickly on this.
Yeah, Joe has been very good about reaching out to all of the unfunded hubs as well, and they're included in our monthly calls.
Yeah.
And so they're very aware of that. They are anticipating this funding, and that there will be some process to determine a readiness to benefit. So they are getting ready now to benefit. So they're very good that they need the right leadership
So
at the table. They need
letters
to
of support, you might as well, in your next meeting with the hubs, immediately start talking about getting not only letters of support from the hubs, but they should be reaching out to all their industry partners in the area and getting them to write letters in support of what they're doing, because that'll be very impactful. And we can turn that in, even if we don't get our day in court, so to speak, or we can orally testify, we can certainly make some level of impact by turning
So
those.
who, should they go to their legislators or should go?
No, I think what I would suggest is everybody writes it, even if they write it to their legislator,
Right,
it should come to you
Give us a
for a more organized push
Okay.
over a particular period of time. What's impactful, believe it or not, would be for them to support later email and or a phone call to the office. The phone call is the most valued piece in the legislature. The legislator counts that in a tally much different than an email or a letter.
20 times.
Yeah, like 20 times. So somebody just picks up the phone, and even if they just talk to the legislative aide that's sitting in front of his office or her office, it goes in a column. It goes in a very powerful
It's
column.
part of that advocacy piece
Yep.
we need to do, so
Yep.
let's move
We'll
forward.
get them calls.
Okay, we're going to take public comment. Any questions from the council before we move to public comment? Okay, we have Don Dayton. Don't, excuse me, that's all.
For the record, I'm Don Jones. I'm a retired CTE STEM teacher, and over 30 years. And it was really exciting to hear Laura begin to explain both the breadth and the complexity of CTE. I'm really excited about bringing STEM and CTE together, but CTE is absolutely huge. It's been there. You go clear back to John Dewey, and this is decades and decades of stuff that's gone on. It is catastrophic what we've done to CTE in Oregon with the demise of so many of these programs. I've watched it during my career, which started in 1976. Just almost cried at many, many points. But we've got a chance to bring some of this back. I think, when we talked about these kids, so Savannah Loberger, all of you saw her when she spoke at the Leadership Summit. That actually, my program is actually a CTE focused program. It's that the T&E part of STEM is CTE in most of the schools in terms of when you actually get out there and find it. It's CTE that funded and put my program together. It's CTE that was when John Niebergall and I from Sherwood, who has the van, when he and I were driving up to Washington to get training in the late 1990s and early 2000s, because they were doing the stuff up there that we knew we needed to ultimately begin to do. And in 2005, I got my first 3D printer on a grant from Intel, etc. Some of you on these programs, we talked about how many schools there are and stuff. I think it was 2011, when my school district, the fourth largest district in the state, was going to cut the auto program, there was only 43 auto programs in the state at that point. And Hillsborough being the fourth largest district in the state, we only had one in the 4 high schools, and they were going to take that to half-time. Many of you may have read the newspaper articles about me fundraising the $46,000 that kept that program alive. There's a limit to what one little teacher can do out there, and a few of us, like myself, John Niebergall, Tim Morley, and Jill Hubbard, the list just goes on, through various little associations like the Oregon Computer Science Teachers Association. And almost like I hate to use a military example, but almost like the French Resistance or the little bit of stuff that was going on in the Philippines after MacArthur left. We've been out there in the underground trying to hold this thing up. Yeah, literally. Getting together on our own time, sharing best practices, and there's a group of us that would really like to see some things happen. But there's a very big limit to what we can do with the funding, of course, that's been available. CTE, when I was in high school, helped me start my first commercial business, which ended up paying half of my college education, which I spent 5 years at. I also got, I can't speak highly enough about student leadership organizations. FFA, I earned a FFA state level proficiency award in agriculture, sales, and service. There were only 13 of those that year, 13 awards across a variety of areas. CTE is your applied academics. It's where this thing all comes together. You are looking at the left-hand side of the column there with math. There's a thing called Math and CTE. If you look that up on the internet, the statistics on what happens when a math teacher and a CTE work together, we know that we get improvements. There's all kinds of great statistics on this stuff. We said that 2% of our kids or something like that do engineering. At my high school, because I had a well-developed CTE focused program of study in engineering-related disciplines, I can tell you that the last year that I taught, 6% of the graduating class earned a CTE focused program of study, which includes certificate, awards, recognition at the graduation, at the awards events that we did, and every one of those kids participated in a 2-hour trade show event where they displayed their own personal project, which was in most cases an invention or a design from scratch of anything from an electronic circuit to an architectural home to one of our design for the other 90% type projects where we're inventing things to help people that live on $1 to $2 a day. The pride that those kids developed, and I've got you can watch some of those projects on the internet, the pride that those kids developed from going through that entire process was incredible. I know the question was brought up, what about the kids in CTE not going to college? What I found was that because of the intensity of the program and the group of things that we were doing, we had a variety of kids that literally by their bootstraps pulled up, and the only reason they didn't go to college was if they couldn't come up with the funding. But they became a cohort that was encouraging each other, and they literally knew that they belonged in college if they could possibly get there. And when you talk about CTE, I can give you the names of kids, and we can go down to OSU or a variety of other places, and you can meet those kids. And they're Savannah and her cohorts, literally, to try to give you an example there. My workload in CTE, I had 17 preps. Dwayne, you came out and visited the program. I know, Mark, you'd come in the summertime when we were doing Girls Get It. I was an adjunct for 4 departments at the community college, and I had almost 20 hours of college transfer credits. That did not happen overnight. It takes years and years and years to just the program renewal process. I went through that so many times, and it's virtually a year or more long process. Integration. I want to make just a brief comment about regional skills centers. Part of what happens in the regional skills centers, and we've tried to do some of those things. Owen Sabin's a great example of how it's a whole high school and they are actually there and it works. If you try to do it on a pull-out basis, you lose travel time. My son was involved in one of those. Use travel time, the kid leaves the high school, Frankly, folks, in high school, if you study the marketing, if you study high school kids and actually talk to them, their friends are the most important thing to them. So now you're going to say you're going to leave and travel someplace else. You're not going to be back in time for sports or whatever. And I'm a huge believer of doing it within the programs. In Hillsborough School District, I can tell you we had over 1,100 teachers. We only had 19 CTE teachers out of the whole 1,100. The metals industry came to me last year and asked why in the world they can't get CNC operators, etc. My comment was, okay, let's get together. We got together. I said, you've got Hillsborough and Beaverton, the third largest and the fourth largest districts in the state. You got 9 high schools. How many metal shops do you have left? There's 1.5. And the metal shop teacher at the 1 is in year 28 of his career. The college and career pathways, we finally hired a person for college and career pathways this fall in the Hillsborough district. Brooke Nova and I have been working on the industrial and engineering pathway. Portland Metro STEM Partnership, I asked them for statistics in Washington County on how many students graduate a year. They told me, based on 2012 data, it's about 7,000. Extrapolated 10 years, that would be 70,000 kids. Went to Reese Lloyd from Workforce Systems and asked him, how many jobs would there be in the industrial and engineering pathway? He did some rough calculations and said about 30,000, but then I saw him a couple of weeks later and said, did you include automotive and construction? He goes, those are in the pathway. So those weren't in. We are still trying to get that data because I would really like to know. Conservatively, I think that could be 35,000 very easily. That would mean that 1 out of every 2 graduates in Washington County could get a job in the industrial and engineering pathway if they had sufficient exposure to choose that line of study in terms of preparation. So in terms of talent, to me, that should speak to our school boards and to our organizations as we're projecting where these courses should be. I had a school district ask me just about 3 weeks, well, it was right after the leadership conference, if they wanted to add 4 CTE teachers, where would they get them? I don't know. Last year, Aloha High School had a half-time Woods job that went unfilled the entire year because the one sub that could do it unexpectedly passed away during the summer. Can you follow me? So I know I'm probably out of time. Folks, if you want to meet kids that have done this CTE thing, they're CTE kids, they're also STEM kids. Jorge Valdez, Jade Torrillo, Chris Gonzalez, Rachel Oster, Keem Lamb, Simon Pennington, you can tell by the surnames. These kids represent the whole gamut. I want to invite all of you to the FTC State Robotics Tournament at Benson High School on March 8th. I'll be there giving tours. I want to see you all there.
I'm going to be there.
Anytime between 11 o'clock and I would say come by at least 3 so that we can
I
show
think
you
you'll see
around.
an invite flying here very shortly from Bruce Schaefer that he's trying to bring a lot of the EIPs into that meeting. So we'll see if we can get some decision makers in that through the doors.
So I have just a quick question. Teacher certification seems to be a hot issue for CTE and things like that.
It's a huge issue.
And you get people out of the trades, retirees, people who have the skill, but they're not teachers. Has that been, what's your view on that
So
issue?
Senator Reardon ran a committee. I was on the committee last summer. We did some research. He has a bill on that. I've been working with George Fox University on trying to, because we not just need to do the 9 through 12 CTE certification, because there is a pathway for people from business and industry to come in through TSPC. We also need those middle school and junior high school shop, or whatever you want to call them, design lab, makerspace type programs where kids can get exposure there. The honest reality right now, I mean, I just retired. I had a guy all lined up for 4 years to take my place. Spark Fund came in, hired him, gave him so much money, moved to Colorado. Then last year, my principal and I put together a thing. Pardon?
I met him yesterday.
Yeah, Derek Rudberg, he's phenomenal. Yeah, one of the few guys we brought into this profession. But he wouldn't have been CTE because he didn't have the 750 hours. And we could have done it on a review committee through the regional CTE coordinators that Laura was talking about. This thing is really deep and very complex. I had a guy that worked with me. My principal and I set up a thing where I would be back half a year. The gentleman would work with me the entire year. He was phenomenal. We had a great year, and 3 weeks before the end of school, Gladstone poached him on us. I believe Tiger,
Mark, there's
I believe Tualatin poached the guy at Woodburn. Right now, the way you get a good person is you poach him from someplace else. But that, you know,
Bring him from out of state.
That's what we do in industry.
No, we gotta grow.
it's a mess. Frankly, we've got to find the people with passion and the people that have the model programs, and we've got to figure out how to get supports to them. And if we do that and then start growing some, I have a bill, or I shouldn't say I have a bill, Betty Comp put in a bill, House Bill 3058. One of the things that's in the laws right now is that there's like 13 categories with a person that's retired under PERS. I call it the endangered species list. It's those people that we just can't get, like police chiefs for small towns and stuff like that. There's 13 on the list. We have a bill, House Bill 3058, that would add CTE teachers to that endangered species list. How many of them could we bring back in? Then they could work over the 1039-hour limit. I know Centennial needed somebody, but he was already retired, so they can only work like 6 periods. Then what do? Cut the rest of the periods of the metal shop? I mean,
And this is a short-term thing.
it's only a short-term fix.
We need to get
It's
that other fix.
no cost to do it. It's cheaper for the school districts. You get trained and so.
Thank
Other
you.
questions?
Thank you so
Awesome.
much. I appreciate all you do in the community for kids, it's great. Okay, anything else from the council? Anyone on the phone? Thank you for participating by phone.
Webinar, I hope it worked well.
Yeah. We enjoyed looking at you, Lisa. You smiled the whole time.
Yeah, this is perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next meeting is in about a month. Do we have a date for that one yet?
We do, yeah, you should have it on your calendar.
Okay, so meeting on the calendar, and the topic will be strategic planning. We'll probably have more conversation on the progress. So, meeting
Thank you all.
adjourned.